Hello, I'm Gary Veazey, and this is CTRM Radio, a podcast from the leading advisory firm in the CTRM software arena, Commodity Technology Advisory. Now, your support is essential to keeping CTRM Radio going, so I'd like to ask you to take just a second to subscribe to our YouTube channel and like and even share this video, please. It helps a lot. You can also listen in audio form on all audio podcast outlets like Spotify, Apple, and so on. Well, recently I spoke to Valuecreed's Yefreed Ditta about European firms entering US gas markets. What's driving this trend and what lies in store for them from a systems perspective? I started by asking him about this trend and why it's occurring.
Thank you, Gary. Indeed, so we're seeing a growing trend among multiple companies from the European region that are trying to enter the US market. And it has been around for a while, but we see an increase the last couple of years. And specifically the gas market. I mean, both power and gas are different, but especially many companies are going into the US gas market as a starting point. And what we observe is that normally there are a bunch of assumptions that are made and on some underestimated or overestimated in terms of effort and how the market works, that makes that some of the decisions that are made at the beginning, early in the project, are not necessarily the right ones, and it becomes sometimes longer for implementing than initially expected, as well as it takes sometimes extra effort to get things done simply because of the wrong assumptions made at the beginning.
Right. And what are you seeing in terms of potentially what some of the key differences are that people trip up over?
Yeah, so I think an important one is, for example, the market structure, right? So in Europe, it's very streamlined, very like a lot of virtual hubs, and actually starting geographically, the US is not a country, right? Like all the states in the US could be considered like a mini country if you make a parallel to Europe. So then in Europe, every single country have like a huge hub, everything. And then as a trader, you don't think too much about the intricacies and the transport within the country. Whereas in the US, you need to consider these inter-pipeline, intrastate pipeline, interstate pipelines.
Yep.
And then you need to deal with a lot of operators for each of these pipelines, which is not, you're not that much exposed to that in Europe. And then that carries a lot of consequences in terms of the number of companies or operators you have to deal with, compared to Europe, where it's only a few, and also things like capacities and this type of contracts are centralized. So then you have only one platform to carry on. So now the gas market is becoming global, right? With especially with the LNG. And there is a huge production in the US, and there are shortages in Europe. So there is a clear business case there. That means that having the knowledge of both markets, and that's probably a reason why many companies are expanding, but also, having that end-to-end value chain will be extremely important, and it will become increasingly important as the time goes. So that's why it's not only about having knowledge of one market or the other, but actually both is where the full business case for strategies like LNG will actually make sense.
Do you see people coming at this more from an LNG perspective, and then are they looking for systems, ETRM solutions that are more LNG focused, for example, or is this a general sort of people just want exposure into the North American market when they're involved in Europe, and they'll take what they can get, so to speak?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. They will take more what they can get, but obviously, if you are in the LNG business, it's kind of a natural step. But it's also like a preemptive or like a preparation to get you there, right? Like if you're in two markets, then LNG can be as a natural next step between North America and Europe, of course. There is always Asia that's pure LNG, and you don't need to necessarily be doing trading on the Asian side. Whereas in North America and Europe, I think there is this case of, produce, transport, get to the port, liquefy, send it over.
What about things like risk and risk management, for example? Is there differences there to consider?
Absolutely. So, for example, in the US, typically, like Henry Hub is the central price, and then from there you have a bunch of bases with respect to the other markets.
Yeah.
You don't observe that here in Europe. I mean, there is a TTF is a very important hub, as well as the MVP in the UK. However, the pricing mechanisms are not so correlated. I mean, they are correlated, but it's not like that you can strictly represent it as TTF being the central and then having a bunch of spreads across the different countries. And since you have north and all the way down to Italy, Balkans, all kind of different gas sources and gas possibilities, that gives and multiple countries involved, that implies that the market has evolved over time and become more standardized, and hence the risk has to be split across countries, whereas in the US, you will typically try to represent everything Henry Hub based and the different spreads across.
Right. So, I mean, in essence, what you're saying isn't necessarily that surprising. It's saying that it's not just another region to trade in. It's quite a different market with a different structure and different things to consider. And I guess the phrase "you don't know what you don't know" is the thing that matters here, right?
Correct. That's it. That's indeed the case. I mean, and to be honest, like expanding, I have in our experience, when you see expanding, for example, if you start your European function and then you want to expand from one country to the other, of course, there is a legal and licensing type of things, but let's say setup wise in your ETRM, you can basically do a copy paste of one country to the other and just change some names and things like that. Whereas in the US, moving from one pipeline to the other is not necessarily the same in terms of copy pasting. So that's very important.
Okay, so what can go wrong then under these circumstances? What sort of issues do you come across?
I think is the idea of normally it's expectation to begin with. So the expectations are normally wrong in the sense that it's not is thought that it will take less time, and it's actually it takes normally longer, and you need to be very well informed, and that's where replicating logic from Europe to the US will normally not work, especially at the technical level. So let's say legally, all that kind of things are, of course, always taken into consideration from the very beginning. But when it comes to implementation is in systems in where the expectations are normally wrong. So you think like maybe, and is normally an increased. So the European markets are simpler in terms of implementing it in systems, and the US are more complex. So normally you have to have that view that it will take me longer to at any region in the US than a country in Europe. Hence, the ETRM designs tend to be oversimplified with respect to what they actually will be. And then, of course, that carries consequences in terms of budgets, timelines. Basically, the wrong expectations will create the wrong impression. So it is always important to have take a step back, have a clear view of what is needed, align and double check your expectations with respect to the reality, and then that will most likely result in a better results.
And so, what does Value Creed offer in terms of assisting companies that want to move in from Europe to US gas markets?
So we're a global company, right? So we were initially born in North America, and now we
Yes.
have expanded into Europe. So our knowledge of the North American gas is very high. We have experts, but we are also very flat. So I'm located in Europe, and I talk on a daily basis with my US colleagues. So the experts are always really available from either side. So then our clients can be at ease that we will be able to actually come up with those differentiations and can give that type of advice. For example, we have made a small presentation, like our point of view on these main aspects that we normally share with our clients, so they know that we know what we're talking about. And because we have the experience, we have done that 2 times and successfully. So I believe the more that experience really counts, because it means that we know already what to expect and then can guide the clients from the beginning. So those expectations that we were talking about earlier are correct from the outset.
And at what point would you prefer to be involved? I mean, at what point do mistakes start being potentially made that have damaging consequences? And therefore, at what point should they ask for help?
I see at the very beginning, right? So when you are doing your feasibility, obviously there will be, as mentioned, the legal entities, all that kind of legal stuff that you licensing that you need to do. Uh, there is not really like important, but at the same time, you start part of the feasibility should be how easy it would be to implement all that business that I want to do, right? And that is where we can already start playing. And once the decision has moved a little bit further, and let's say is made, let's go for it. Let's start implementing. That's the perfect moment to start working at a higher pace. Let's say, obviously at the beginning, you clarify the expectation, give some point of view, but then when it comes to actually executing, the earlier in the process, the better.
Okay, so you have the expertise in the markets themselves, and you have some experience of doing this. And I assume you have some degree of expertise with all of the ETRMs on the market that might be utilized by these companies, correct?
Exactly. So normally that's for example another important point that the ETRM that you have in Europe might not work in the US market, typically because, as mentioned, the complexity is quite higher. So having that clarity from the beginning will help you to make the right decision in terms, for example, okay, should I use the same ETRM? Should I go for a selection? What kind of adaptations or customizations I would need to do to make it work? And that plugs, you need to plug all those aspects within your budgeting or your timeline, right? So
Yeah.
that's important to have it clear from the beginning.
And have Value Creed got involved with sort of modifying ETRMs or adding functionality to them in order to help them serve a different marketplace, for example?
Yeah, so I mean, there are a few ETRMs which support both markets, and we have been involved in the configuration of those 100%. So sometimes you need to build some customizations anyway in the surroundings, and that's also our area of expertise, and those that allow, as well as the integration with multiple tools. There are certain tools in the US that facilitate, especially in the logistics space, the implementation and the go-to-market speed. We are also actually we work very closely with many of those tools and the integration aspects between that kind of tools and the ETRMs. When it comes to the market knowledge, it's very important to know exactly in what region you will be. So that's also like a very important decision to be made from the very beginning. Are you going to be more on the East Coast, the West Coast, South, Dallas, Texas, and that area? And choosing the right point is also equally important when it comes to the implementation. So it doesn't only as mentioned, it's like if you were to move to Europe, what country will start working and then expand from there is also an important decision to make. Of course, it's more commercially related, but let's say in terms of implementation, it's important to know it. Regasify,
Yeah.
put it in the pipeline and then sell it, right? So then you can build that full
Yeah.
supply chain from the beginning.
So just to summarize then, how would you summarize the problem and the solution and what value Creed can bring to the table?
So it's very important to say this is not a copy-paste implementation, right? It's actually a full trading model transition. So if you as a company realize that and recognize that from the very beginning, then you will win speed, control, and you will be able to access the market quicker. And we are there to enable that shift.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you.